So, today we're going to dive into something pretty wild. We're looking at how some incredibly old religious ideas aren't just gathering dust in history books. According to our source material, they're actually being used as active blueprints, shaping modern politics, new technology, and even war right now. And it really all kicks off with this puzzle. On October 29th, 2023, Israel's prime minister used this exact phrase. Now, if you don't know the context, it might just sound like some old historical reference, but as our source explains, this is a classic dog whistle, a coded message that carries a very specific and very heavy meaning. So, the question is, who or what is Amalek? Okay, so in the Hebrew Bible, Amalek is basically the original ultimate enemy of the Israelites. For centuries, Jewish scholars pretty much agreed that since you can't trace the family tree of the Amalekites to anyone alive today, the command against them was, well, it was off the table. But the source points out a major shift in some modern Zionist thinking. The idea is that Amalek isn't a bloodline anymore. It's become a label you can stick on any group you see as your enemy, whether that was the Romans, the Nazis, or in today's world, Palestinians and Iranians.
And you've got to understand, invoking Amalek isn't just a call to fight. It's a call to carry out a very specific biblical commandment. And that command involves a policy called herem. Our source defines herem as total annihilation. We're talking men, women, children, even their livestock. It's a divine mandate for what we would, in modern terms, call genocide.
And that brings us to a truly stark modern number. The source material connects this ideology to an 83% civilian casualty rate in Gaza. It's a horrifying echo. When an ancient command for complete annihilation meets modern military tech, the consequences are just devastatingly clear. This isn't just theology. It has a terrifyingly real-world application. So you might be thinking this is all an internal Jewish theological debate, but here's the thing. The political movement of Zionism has found its biggest, most passionate supporters among millions of evangelical Christians around the world. So how on earth did an ancient Hebrew concept become a core belief for a huge chunk of modern Christianity? Well, the answer, according to our source, lies in a pretty recent theological shakeup, something that happened back in the 19th century. This is really the birthplace of Christian Zionism as we know it today. So, let's meet the main character in this part of the story, John Nelson Darby. He's the architect behind a really radical system for interpreting the Bible called dispensationalism. Think of it as a whole new way of reading biblical prophecy, one that completely rewrote the end times playbook for millions of Christians and basically laid all the theological tracks for Christian Zionism. To get what Darby was doing, you have to understand the problem he was trying to fix. He looked at the teachings of Jesus, and then he looked at the teachings of the Apostle Paul, and thought, wait a minute, these don't quite line up. His solution wasn't to pick one. Instead, he came up with a radical idea that there were actually two different gospels for two different groups of people at two different times. This was a huge break from traditional Christian thought. So what came out of this new system? It's something called dual covenant theology. And the core idea is this: God's original deal, or covenant, with the Jewish people is still valid. It's still active. And that leads to a massive conclusion in this belief system. Jewish people don't need to accept Jesus to be saved because their covenant is like a separate parallel path to God. And here is why all of that is so important. This theology is the engine driving the entire Christian Zionist movement. It leads to these core beliefs: that the Jewish people are still God's chosen people, that the modern nation of Israel is the fulfillment of prophecy, and, this is the big one, that supporting Israel is a crucial step to kickstarting the second coming of Jesus. It all hangs on rereading a promise made to one man, Abraham, and applying it to the modern political state of Israel. Okay, so if supporting the state of Israel is step one on the checklist, what's next? Well, according to this theology, there's a very specific, very physical blueprint for how to trigger the end times. And here's the roadmap. Step one, getting Jewish people back to Israel. Well, they see that as done with the founding of the state in 1948. But the next step, the one that gets so much focus and funding, is building a third temple right on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, which, by the way, is where the Al-Aqsa Mosque currently stands. Only after that happens, they believe, can Jesus come back to rule for 1,000 years. But here's the thing. Our source, Dr. Ali Atai, points out a huge theological catch. For hundreds of years, mainstream Christianity just didn't teach this. This idea of a physical third temple, it's just not there in the New Testament. I mean, Jesus himself predicted the destruction of the second temple, but he never said a word about building a third one. In fact, the source points to what seems like a direct contradiction. In the very last book of the New Testament, Revelation, there's this vision of the ultimate heavenly city, the New Jerusalem. And what does it say? Super explicitly, there was no temple in it. This suggests that this whole Third Temple project is actually a Jewish belief that's been kind of absorbed into Christian Zionism, not something that comes from Christian scripture itself. All right, we've talked ancient beliefs and 19th century theology. Now you need to buckle up because the story takes a sharp, unexpected turn and connects all of this directly to Silicon Valley and the world of artificial intelligence. Let's bring in Peter Thiel, the tech billionaire, co-founder of PayPal and founder of Palantir, a company that builds some of the most advanced AI surveillance and military tech for governments. And what's his, obsession that he discusses in these private, elite meetings? The Antichrist. Thiel's whole justification for his work reportedly revolves around this super obscure concept from the New Testament, the Keton. Our source explains that it's a Greek term for some kind of mysterious restraining force, something or someone that is literally holding down the Antichrist, keeping him from taking power. Theologians have been debating who or what the Keton is for centuries. And this is where we get to the heart of the conflict. Peter Thiel seems to be claiming that his technology, AI surveillance, powerful weapons, is the modern-day Keton, a force for order that's holding back apocalyptic chaos. But our source presents a really chilling counterargument. In Islamic prophecy, the Antichrist figure, known as the Dajjal, is the ultimate master of deception. So what could possibly be a better tool for a master deceiver than AI? A technology that can create deepfakes, spread misinformation on a massive scale, and completely blur the lines between what's real and what's fake? So let's bring this all back down to earth, because these aren't just abstract ideas for a theology class. They have very real, tangible, geopolitical goals that are playing out on the world stage as we speak. On one side, this source describes some radical Jewish prophecies that imagine a Messiah who conquers the world. And on the other, you have Christian Zionism actively pushing for what they call the Greater Israel Project. That's a territory based on a biblical promise that would stretch from the Nile River to the Euphrates. A plan like that would mean annexing parts of Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq. And this really is the key takeaway from our whole explainer. These ideas, which might have seemed fringe not that long ago, are now being whispered and sometimes shouted in the halls of power. These ideologies are providing a kind of divine permission slip for political and military action, helping to shape foreign policy and fueling a conflict that many followers believe is a necessary and even a desirable step towards their prophesied end. Which leaves us with a final and pretty sobering question. We're at this absolutely unprecedented point in history where ancient apocalyptic beliefs are intersecting with the most powerful and potentially the most deceptive technology that humans have ever made. One side believes it's using tech to hold back the end, while the other believes it's a sign that the end is near. So when ancient prophecy meets AI, who or what is really writing the final chapter?